Hello Year 12. This short video explains to you the details for your Advanced English First Assessment task, which is the Human Experience podcast. Okay, so you can see on your gold sheet in front of you that this is your first assessment task and it's weighted at 20%. It's not due until the 30th of November, but we're giving this out very early, so you've got plenty of time to prepare. You'll see that you've got the details there of the outcomes being assessed and also that it is due by 4 p.m. I'll come back to the due date in a little bit. Okay, so the question itself. You are to write and record a podcast that reveals your understanding of the common module, which is human experience, your prescribed text, which for you guys is George Orwell's 1984, and one related text. During your podcast, you will need to answer the following question. Literature is essentially an anthropological study. Through it, we learn about ourselves. To what extent is this true of your texts? Now, to make the podcast interesting, you can choose to play certain roles. So you could be some Harvard professor, or you could be a novelist writing about, Orwell's life, or someone writing an autobiography. You can be creative. We want you to have a little bit of fun with this. So the podcast form should be pretty familiar to you now. So the Year 11 one that you did was practice for this first assessment task. But the point of difference is this, the reference to a related text. Now, to clarify, a related text is a text that Nessa suggests allows you to see some areas of commonality, some areas of distinction and difference. But the skill that you're learning by having a related text is thinking about how texts cooperate together, thinking about linking texts, integrating them. This text will only get assessed in the internal assessment task. It's not something that you'll refer to in the HSC exam. We're providing you with your gold sheet today a booklet that looks like the little image on my screen here. That's a selection of short texts, mainly in the prose fiction form, that deal with human experience. Now, that booklet serves two purposes. One, it's going to help you engage with short text to get ready for part 1 of the paper, so the short answers, but then also that's where you'll pick your related text. You'll talk a little bit more with your teacher about that in class. Okay, so the heart of our assignment is this question here, that literature essentially, or basically when you think about literature, we think about it as an anthropological study. I'd urge you to look that up. What does that mean? To simplify it down as quickly as I can, it's a study of what it means to be human. And by reading literature, we inevitably are going to learn about ourselves. Now, the second part of the question asks, to what extent is this true of the text that you've studied? For those of you with friends in the year above, the HSC question for human experience for 2023 was a to what extent question. We want you to get comfortable making an evaluative judgment. So that part of the question is really important, and I'll come back to that when I show you the slide with the assessment criteria. Okay, so the timing is a little longer than your Year 11 one because you have the related text, but it's stopped at 4 minutes and 30. Now, a lot of you found that a challenge in Year 11, so I urge you to be careful with that in Year 12. You cannot write endlessly long essays in the HSC, so we are keeping it at 4:30 to try to train you and develop your skills in being succinct, concise, and really a test of brevity. Can you get your meaning down on the page? Can you get your meaning into your podcast in 4 minutes 30 with clarity and cohesion, but without waffling on? So you will be stopped at 4 minutes 30. So it's your job to be really mindful of the time. Now, for submission, it's exactly the same as your Year 11. So everything we did then was to try to get you more comfortable for this task. So there'll be a Google Classroom and a Turnitin. So the Turnitin is where you put your transcript. So a Word or PDF version of your typed up who was saying what. The audio that we will just press play to and listen to gets loaded to the Google Classroom page, and it's the same one that you did in Year 11. You'll just see a new assignment there. Now, a lot of the questions are about how do we use this related text. we are giving you a rough guide in terms of percentage, so about 70% on Orwell and 30% on your related. Now, of course, that's rubbery. You can decide how you do that, depending on your own style and interest and what related text you use, but that's a good time guide, 70-30. But I wouldn't want you to think about it as here's some stuff on Orwell, here's some stuff on my related, thinking about how you can integrate them. Your teacher will give you more information about how drafts are submitted, so whether it's Google Classroom or email, but we would like them in early so that we've got enough time to give you feedback and then you have time to action those changes. Okay, so the marking criteria is not just for teachers, it is for you. I want you to think about this is the criteria that we will be actually using to mark your assignment. So you can unpack this, like I will now, really carefully to know what's expected of you. So there are 3 outcomes, and you'll see that the band descriptions or the grade descriptions go from skillful as an A to effective, adequate, limited, and elementary. Now, this is the same marking criteria for standard or advanced because, as you're aware, this is the common module. So it's the same for everyone that does advanced and standard. All right, so the first thing we're assessing is how well you can skillfully evaluate the stimulus and answer the question. Now, notice that evaluation, because you need to think to what extent. Now, the fact that you've got 2 texts makes that evaluation a little bit easier, because you might want to be thinking that it's not just throwing in those words like, Orwell brilliantly deals with the human experience. We don't want those empty adjectives. We actually want you to evaluate how true is this statement for Orwell's text. And I would argue it's very true. And you need to think, well, how can I validate that? How can I show that judgment? Now, you might want to unpack similarities and differences between Orwell and your related and use that as a way to evaluate between them as well. And of course, always a discriminating factor is how well the kid, how well the student, how well the response answers the question. Not deviating and writing your own version or writing an essay that you think would work. It's got to be a podcast that will answer this question before you. Now, the second outcome is about how well you can present an insightful argument supported by detailed and well-evidenced textual analysis. Now, the word argument is underlined. Now, most of you, I'm hoping, are thinking that means thesis. We want you to actually have something to say. The A-range scripts are not just stuff I know or information, but an argument, your interpretation of the text, and you can prove it over your 4.5-minute podcast. Of course, it comes back to how well you know the text. So for an A-range script, we want to see very detailed, well-evidenced textual analysis. So not just quoting, but actually analysing the text. So the analysis is the so what moment. Why use that technique? Thinking about how the technique communicates meaning. And then the third outcome, which is generally, except for a little bit of phrasing, the same across all English tasks. And this is about your ability to compose a response, so your control of language and form and those sort of things. So the A-range descriptors are we want it to be perceptive, meaning we want it to have insight, interpretation. We want it to be integrated. You have a related text. So think about if the question's about literature overall, then you need 2 texts. You can't just go to Orwell. So think about how you can integrate them. And we also want to hear your opinion. English is about you learning to speak your mind, to have something to say. This is what I think of the world and being articulate. So think about a personal voice. And of course, being able to write and compose in the podcast form. So it's a little bit of the skills that you did in discursive writing in year 11. So the skills are the same, but it's how well you do them. So you'll see that then the adjectives go to effective and sound and so forth. Okay, a few last minute tips. You really need to know your text, Orwell, and related text well. Now, for the Orwell example, I'll use the HSC at the moment. Students don't impress markers if they just rely on the obvious evidence. So show the marker that you know Orwell so well that you can find even nuanced evidence, not just the obvious. Read widely. The good thing about Orwell is he's been around for ages and everyone loves him. So some of the best minds of our time have written essays about him. Look at those academic essays to enrich your understanding. And plan this carefully. Even though a discursive piece should be a discussion, you've got a very short window of time to cover a lot. So plan it out maybe like an essay scaffold. Check the fluidity. So because it is going to be a podcast, think about reading passages out loud. Does it make sense? Does it feel controlled and fluent? And then once you've got your basic draft, test it out on a real audience. Get a best friend or a neighbour or older brother and sister to give you feedback before it even comes to the teacher. It is quite a big task. That's why we're handing it out early. So manage your time wisely. Start to think about checkpoints. Where should you be at week 4, 5, 6, and so forth? Upload early. You are year 12 now. There is no leeway for, oh, my computer wasn't working or I thought it wasn't due till midnight. It is 4 p.m. Turnitin closes at 4 p.m. Now, if you try to start loading it at 3:59 and it's a big file and therefore it doesn't upload by 4 o'clock, it will therefore be late. So manage your time carefully. 4 o'clock is the absolute deadline. It is an opportunity for you to find your voice. And I think we really tried to promote that a lot in Year 11 as well. Express your ideas of the world, how you've come to understand the world and the human experience through your examination of literature. So have a bit of fun with it. If you've got any questions, talk to your English teachers. Always, I'm available as well. If you have any questions, particularly about NESAR and illness, misadventure and things like that, have those conversations early. All right, good luck and enjoy the podcast.